Hi, I'm Dr. Jennifer Walton-Fassett. I am an associate professor in the physical education teacher education program. I'm also the program coordinator and director of teacher ed in EHHS.
And where do you work at?
I work at Kent State University.
All right. So the first question I have for you is, physical education classes should be an environment that promotes enjoyable, lifelong physical activities. So why do non-competitive and female students feel ashamed, embarrassed, or less interested in PE classes?
Are you asking me why?
Yeah.
Why is because it's still a very sport-dominated curriculum. Most sport, perception anyway, is on male sports. So sports like basketball, football, are traditionally still in PE programs. The emphasis is that girls are not as good as sports, or it's sports that girls may not play as often. And so girls are treated differently in physical education. Also, it tends to be where boys are more domineering. So even if a female is skillful and can be a positive performer in PE, they still want to control the performance of play, and which can be quite frustrating for females. So that's just a little snippet. There's a lot there that goes into really why females do not feel supported or not feel safe in a physical education environment.
Okay. What is your opinion about teachers showing gender bias?
It drives me up the wall. So I teach the secondary content and methods class, which is a primary course for our senior students. They're out teaching at the middle school and high school level. And from the very first day of class, I provide them real life experiences of teachers that genderize their curriculum. So here's an example. Right here in our backyard, we have great teachers, but they will say, girls are going to stay indoors and play ultimate frisbee while the boys go outside and play flag football. There's another cooperating teacher that will literally make copies of papers, and it's pink for girls and blue for boys. The gender stereotypes are pervasive. Students, some students are aware of the influence of that, and so we call that the hidden curriculum. They're sending hidden messages to students based on their gender. We know that there's not a binary of gender, that it's just male, just female. It's gender fluid, and same thing with sexuality. And so there's a lot of hidden messages that are distributed from teachers. So it's very frustrating for me. I'm very much about social justice, so I like to teach my students about how we perpetuate social inequalities, and that's what's happening with teachers who are perpetuating these social inequalities based on gender.
And for the people who don't know much about PE social justice, can you explain that?
So social justice really is focusing on social cultural issues such as gender, sexuality, religion, race, etc., and really getting students, exposed to what those social issues are. Social justice is really about taking action on a social issue. Traditionally in physical education, social justice issues have not been very much focused on. We just focus on the actual tasks and activities of performance, regardless of what, as I said, all these hidden messages. And so when we say you have to have 3 consecutive passes and one of them has to be a girl, that's like a hidden message there. Or if you let them to create, teams and all the teams are racially divided, or girls and boys are completely separated. It's trying to make awareness of the decisions that we make as teachers of how these social issues that are occurring right in our classes. A huge another thing is religion, and how if you're doing dance or certain performances, and if they can't make eye contact with you, if they cannot touch somebody else, that it's not a defiance of what's happening, it's part of their religion.
All right. Well, what is your opinion about teachers not allowing students, mostly girls, not take part in any activities if not dressed properly? Should they not be allowed to participate, or what do you think on that?
So, for the longest time in physical education, we graded them on participation, whether they dressed, and how much effort that they gave. I have no idea how effort was measured because that is so variable. And whether they dressed. Do students need to be safe? Yes, and I mean students. It's not just based on females. So if they have appropriate foot attire, I don't care what they're wearing. And so, no, females should not just be allowed to just be, okay and sit out. And for some teachers, that makes it easier. They don't have to focus on them because they think that they're just not skillful or they don't want to participate, when it's really the environment the teacher's establishing. But the same thing is true for boys. There are a lot of boys that are not skillful, that are in this very masculine type of environment, and they have no choice. They have to participate, and yet they're also getting embarrassed. So it's not just females. And then you have the other side of females who are really skillful, and then they're considered tomboys or they're gay if they're good at sport, and too masculine.
All right. Ability in classes. So what is your opinion on segregation in physical education?
Segregation based on ability or segregation based on gender?
Gender first.
So I've done research, segregation based on gender, and I don't believe in that, especially just because of gender identity. And so some students we have, obviously more students who are identifying as trans or questioning, etc. And so to be able, again, to put them into this box that males are going to want to be over here, females are going to be over here, does not give them that freedom to be completely who they are. So I'm definitely more favorable for coeducation. Research shows that middle school students ultimately would prefer to have same gender classes versus coeducation classes, and high school students prefer to have coeducational classes. We've ultimately had co-ed classes since 1972, since the enactment of Title IX, so that's over 40 years that we've had coeducational classes. Based on ability, we're always going to have mixed ability in physical education, and that's the way that we should certainly teach our students. And so when we teach our students how to lesson plan, we have what's called modifications, so learning how to extend or challenge a student that is more skillful, and ways to simplify for a student that is struggling. That has always been the case, except I should say with high school who have elective courses. Elective courses, usually if they have a student has selected an elective, is because they feel like they might be a high performer in that class. And then you can do more sport specialization or whatever the courses entail to. But traditionally, it's mixed ability groupings. I believe in mixed ability groupings. It allows the higher skilled to help the lower skilled if you're doing it right. And certainly vice versa, because when I get my students in PE, my pre-service teachers, they don't understand that majority of the students that they're going to be working with are not as skillful because they've been successful themselves. And so ultimately, for me, I just want students to be physically active outside of PE and for lifelong. So if we create a negative environment for them in PE, the likelihood of that happening is not very high.
The negativity, like the negativity in PE classes, how do you say who's to blame for that? Is it the teachers, the curriculum itself, like the program, or the school?
It's all of the above and beyond. So based again on my research, since I've been focusing on my research, I really was looking at adolescent girls and was really trying to learn from them, and I learned a lot, and that's not getting to your question. But through that work, I realized that higher education, is the problem. Because if we don't teach them about how to develop a equitable curriculum, then they're not going to know, because they're just going to go based on what they have learned and been brought up into, which is most of the time perpetuating social inequalities. So yes, it's on the teacher, because ultimately they're the ones that make the decisions. They're the ones that decide what the curriculum is going to be. So when they decide to say girls are going to do ultimate frisbee inside and boys are going to do flag football outside, that's a teacher decision, and that is a poor curriculum decision. But they did not learn also in their undergraduate or licensure programs on how not to make those type of choices. You would think that, they should know, but not necessarily, because many of us don't look at things from a social justice perspective, and so we just continue to do what has been done traditionally for a long period of time. So my argument is us in higher ed, in teacher licensure programs, need to create change, because I can certainly say probably Rachel, yourself, or anybody else will not take a social justice in PE class, so you're not going to learn about that. So how can we expect teachers to go out and not even be advocates of it, but just to make a socially just, sound, and equitable curriculum if they're not even aware, don't even have an awareness of it. And then some, of course, comes from a very personal standpoint to each teacher of the biases that they may or may not have based on their own belief systems. So it's complicated, but I believe that we in higher education need to change for things to change in K-12 schools.
My next question is, like, how do you, before teachers, create like a friendly, cohesive like environment for students, including like females, when it comes to like harassment or discouragement? And
what kind of environment do I like in the PE environment?
PE, or like a classroom in high school environment, PE class.
So if I was teaching?
Yes. Like if you were the teacher, how do you create that?
Teacher, I mean, I would try to make the most welcoming, safe I mean physically and emotionally, inclusive environment as humanly possible. I would make sure that I'm not perpetuating social inequalities. Something that's really important is to ask students what they feel is safe and welcoming and what is important to them. I would address and teach them about social justice issues from the get-go. So I would intentionally teach about social justice so that in week 4 of the school year, and they're like, that person's such a fag, they're so gay, and they're saying this type of language that hopefully that culture won't be established. And so I guess I would create a culture that I feel like is very, very inclusive, and really decreases any kind of social inequalities. No one's perfect. There's going to be issues, and it's challenging and it's hard, but I feel like I can navigate those social issues for them to be learning experiences for my students. And I feel like that's what I certainly do in my classes here in higher education. And I still want my classroom to be challenging. I want it to be a learning environment, so I want them to be able to learn. But at the end of the day, if a student can't serve a volleyball behind the serve line, guess what? Life is going to go on. But I want them to be able to feel comfortable being physically active. I want them to feel comfortable about who they are, being able to work and collaborate with other people. That to me is more important than whether they can serve volleyball over a net.
All right. Have any advice or feedback you want to give to future students or future PE teachers?
Yes, I want to make. Not everybody has my type of viewpoint of how important social justice is. It's a passion of mine, but I believe, and I always say this to my students, that no matter what, we will influence thousands of children's lives, whether it's positive or negative. And my hope is that our teachers are passionate about what they want to do, come in for the right reasons, because you care about kids, ultimately, is what's most important, more than anything. And that you are influencing them in a positive way, that you're making choices that, again, will not harm or hurt students. And I'm really talking from an emotional standpoint. I think that our students are very much about safe physically, but harmful in an emotional way, and how important it is to teach to the entire student and not just about the physical. It goes well beyond that.
All right. Thank you so much for helping me out.